How does a bomber designed in the early 1950s still fly missions today? Think about that for a second. The B-52 first flew in 1952. That means this aircraft is older than color television, older than NASA, and older than most people's grandparents. And somehow, the US Air Force still uses it. Even crazier, the military plans to keep flying the B-52 into the 2050s. That would make it nearly 100 years old. So how did this Cold War bomber survive for so long? Simple, because the B-52 never stopped evolving. Back in the 1950s, America had one huge fear: nuclear war with the Soviet Union. The mission of the B-52 was brutally simple: fly across the planet, carry nuclear bombs, destroy Soviet targets before they destroy yours. This thing was basically built for World War III. It could fly long distances, carry massive payloads, and stay in the air for extremely long missions. At the time, that made it one of the most terrifying weapons on Earth. But then, technology changed. Fast. By the 1960s, Soviet air defense systems were becoming deadly. Surface-to-air missiles meant flying high above enemy territory was suddenly a terrible idea. So the B-52 adapted. Instead of flying high, pilots started flying low, very low. The bomber that once cruised peacefully at high altitude was now blasting through valleys and mountains to avoid radar detection. Imagine an 8-engine bomber flying through the dark just above the ground. That shift forced major upgrades. The airframe had to handle more stress. Navigation systems improved. Electronic warfare equipment was added. The B-52 wasn't staying the same aircraft anymore. It was reinventing itself. Then came Vietnam. And once again, the mission changed. The giant nuclear bomber suddenly became a conventional war machine. Instead of preparing for the apocalypse, B-52s were now carrying huge amounts of regular bombs for long bombing campaigns. And that transformation mattered, because after Vietnam, the Air Force realized something important. Even if nuclear war never happened, America would still need long-range bombers for smaller conflicts around the world. So instead of retiring the B-52, they kept upgrading it. Then came another revolution: precision weapons. By the 1990s and early 2000s, warfare had changed completely. GPS-guided bombs, cruise missiles, digital targeting systems. A lot of older aircraft became obsolete during this era, but not the B-52, because instead of replacing the airplane, the Air Force replaced almost everything inside it. Old analog systems became digital, new radars were installed, modern targeting pods were added, and suddenly a bomber designed during the Eisenhower administration could launch satellite-guided weapons with incredible accuracy. The B-52 evolved from a carpet bomber into a long-range missile truck, and honestly, that role fits modern warfare perfectly, which brings up the obvious question: why hasn't America retired it already? Well, there are a few reasons. First, it's surprisingly cheap. Compared to aircraft like the B-2 stealth bomber, the B-52 costs far less to operate. Second, it carries an insane amount of weapons. Even today, very few aircraft can match its payload capacity, and modern warfare no longer requires bombers to fly directly over heavily defended targets. Instead, the B-52 can stay hundreds of miles away and launch long-range cruise missiles safely from a distance. That makes the aircraft far more useful than people think. And finally, the airframe itself turned out to be incredibly durable. The plane aged slower than expected, which means the Air Force realized something shocking. Keeping the B-52 alive was actually cheaper and smarter than replacing it completely. And now, the aircraft is getting its biggest upgrade yet: new engines. After more than 60 years, the Air Force is replacing the bomber's old engines with modern ones designed to improve fuel efficiency, reduce maintenance, and extend the aircraft's lifespan even further. There are also radar upgrades, electronics upgrades, and new communication systems. At this point, the B-52 is basically becoming a Cold War bomber with a 21st century brain. And that's the real reason this aircraft survived. Most military machines become obsolete. The B-52 became adaptable. Every generation found a new way to use it, from nuclear deterrence to low-altitude penetration to conventional bombing to precision strikes to long-range missile warfare. The mission kept changing, and the bomber changed with it. But even legends don't last forever. For decades, people joked that the B-52 would outlive everything, and honestly, they weren't completely wrong. The aircraft has survived longer than almost anyone expected, not because it stayed the same, but because it kept adapting. Now, for the first time in a long time, the US Air Force is seriously beginning to think about what could eventually replace it. Not because the B-52 failed, actually the opposite. The bomber survived so long that warfare itself changed around it. Modern air defenses are becoming more dangerous. Stealth matters more than ever, and drones and autonomous systems are starting to reshape air combat entirely. Eventually, even the most adaptable aircraft reaches its limits. But maybe that's not the real legacy of the B-52, because even if the airplane itself eventually retires, the ideas behind it probably won't. The B-52 proved that a bomber could survive generations of warfare by evolving with the times. It started as a nuclear bomber, then became a low-altitude penetrator, then a conventional bomb truck, then a precision strike platform. And now it's evolving again into a long-range missile carrier for modern networked warfare. That core idea, delivering massive firepower across enormous distances, still defines American air power today. Future bombers may look completely different. They may be stealthier, smarter, even partially autonomous, but many of the concepts behind them were already proven by the B-52 decades ago. So even after the aircraft itself is finally gone, part of the B-52 may still live on in every bomber that comes after it.